I've finally popped my Todd Haynes cherry.
Welcome to Groovy Movies. My name is Lily Austin.
And my name's James Brailsford. Hello.
And this week on the podcast, we're talking about new release, May-December. Love Todd Haynes, the director, so I'm very excited to have this conversation. But before we get to that, we thought we'd tell you about our weekend, our little Groovy Movies, what's the word called? Field trip.
IRL meetup.
Yes, IRL meetup, field trip, out in the real world. James, what did we do last weekend?
We both went to the Aesthetica Film Festival in York, which I'd never really heard of before until you mentioned it to me. Or no, actually, a film that I worked on a couple of years ago was screening in there. And so I think that's how I heard about it. But I didn't really know much about the festival. But turning up to York last weekend, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it was a funny coincidence because I had looked into it last year and wanted to go. And then when I mentioned it to you, you were like, oh, as it happens, I've got a film I worked on happens to be in the festival. So we went to York, went to the festival. And yeah, it's a big deal. There are like loads of screenings.
Yeah, it had there was quite a buzzy atmosphere, lots of stuff going on. I mean, the talks looked great. We went to a few ourselves, but because we weren't there for the full length of the festival. Earlier in the week, there was, I think, Industrial Light and Magic. We're talking about visual effects. You know, there was a lot of stuff that seemed really good, and it's definitely now on my radar, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's a short film festival. And I haven't seen that many short films in my life. So it was actually really good to go to see how that compares, what makes a short film, because it's different from
it's its own particular art form. And yeah, I haven't watched short films in a long time. When I was at film school, I used to watch them all the time because, of course, that's what you are looking to make as a film school student. You start watching other short films, you go to the festivals, you go to the screenings that might be happening of other student work. So you're trying to see what's out there, what's doing well, and get your head in that world. But once you're out of the short film world, I don't know, I've stopped watching them as much. So it was nice to go back into it because it got me excited about short films again, actually. It's like it's a nice tapas way of devouring film content.
Yeah. I think I said to you when we were there that my takeaway is that I feel a bit nervous to say this in case anyone's offended, but my takeaway was that I think in particular documentary works really well for the short film format. I think that there are certain beats in a narrative film that it feels a little bit rushed sometimes to hit in that shorter time span. But I think often a good story, you only need 15 minutes or half an hour to really do it justice when it's a documentary, was how it felt being there.
I think short documentaries as well, it means that you can cover an incredibly unique or quirky story or like a story that has one thing about it that's interesting, but so it might struggle to make a 90-minute feature. The story subject would probably be stretched way beyond breaking point at 90 minutes, because they often say with a short film, a good short film, you can imagine it being a feature, but a good, I don't know, a short documentary, I think what you're saying is like it suits that length. For 15 or 20 minutes, you can be in this particular world, explore the theme of it, and it feels just about right.
I think you're so right. And I think actually that it's not that most narrative short films just don't work so well. It's that I think actually often what people are trying to do is do a feature film in a smaller version as a showcase for something bigger they want to do. Whereas the films that we saw, the narrative films that we saw worked well when they actually, like you say, have one smaller thing that you're exploring and just keep it to that one small idea that doesn't necessarily need that full length of time. Like thinking about that film, what was it called? The thriller with the black and white thriller that we saw that was really good. I've now forgotten what it was. Do you know the one I mean?
I know the one you mean.
It was called like Mirrors or something, but it wasn't that.
Oh, it's called Shadows.
Thank you. Shadows. Oh, shadows, mirrors. Oh, what does that mean?
Yeah. That was a great short film. That was like a classic example of a good short film.
Yeah, and it was quite that she kept it tight, right? It was just one night, one little interaction with the characters, and then expanded from that.
One kind of location, just a couple of different places in that one location.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, so I want you to tell me more about the film that you worked on, James.
Yeah, well, this was a film that I was involved with due to being recommended by friend of the show, Björn Brattberg, who
Woo!
is a cinematographer who's from Norway, and he knows a lot of filmmakers over there, including the director Jannike Sistad Jakobsen. We'll put a link to her work in the show notes. And this film is called New York 81. It's kind of about Jannike's story about a photograph she found down the back of a desk in an old photographic lab that she worked with in the 90s. And it was a photo of an old couple, and in the middle was a young boy wearing a New York 1981 T-shirt or 81 T-shirt. And the thing is, the image looked like they were in New York somewhere on a beach in America. And obviously this was in Norway that she found the photograph. So she's just always wondering what was the story behind it, the photograph. And she actually asked a load of friends in like 2000, 2001, where I think when she was at film school. So she's got all this footage from 20 years ago. And then she picks the story up because obviously with Facebook and social media, it's much easier to try and track things down. So she picks up the story again, and she managed to get much further than she did the first time around.
I loved it. I loved that the starting with this older footage and seeing Yannicka younger as well, and then later on, I loved that. And just it was so nice, the clips of her friends and people she spoke to looking at the photo and pondering, hypothesizing about who they are, what the dynamic is, because there are interesting things you can, when you look closely at this photo, that the younger guy is a little bit awkward perhaps. There are like interesting elements. And how often do we stare and really look at a photo and think about all the possible stories that are behind it?
And also that first half of the film where it is all the archive footage, it's people trying to figure out the stories, but then you're also getting a sense of these different personalities. So you keep cutting between the different characters, and one's more of a joker, one's a bit more considered.
Yeah, true.
So you've got like I don't know about a meta, but you've got another strand of the documentary, which isn't just the direct, what's the story of the photograph. You're also getting to meet these people who are in Jannike's life. You even get involved with them to a degree that you find out about one of the people in the videos, something in the documentary, and that kind of hits you quite a little bit emotionally as well, because you've just spent a bit of time with them. There's a few different threads working away there, which makes it different from seeing something like this that might be more a TV format. You probably wouldn't, it would probably be much more regimented, less loose feeling.
And yeah, another example of a documentary short that works very well in that. And all the film, it was part of a grouping of different documentary films that were all quite that focused on the filmmaker, right? They were personal.
So the filmmaker was very much an active part of the story they were telling.
Right,
so
yeah.
It's not an observational documentary. It's more like a participatory documentary. So the documentarian is the character, or is a character at least, in the documentary.
Yeah, it was very good, yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, it was a great film. And I was very proud to have been a part of it. And because of that, I've now got my very first credit on IMDb as a cinematographer. I'm so chuffed.
Wow, that's so exciting.
Oh, yeah. Because when I watched my credit go up, obviously I wonder what I'm officially credited at. And I was second unit cinematographer. So I was like, oh, I wonder if that's gone on to IMDb as that. So I looked up and there I am. So now I've got a cinematography or like camera credit, which I've never had before. So that's great.
Oh, wow. That's so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's a little mini life career goal achieved, a little mini tick there, you know.
Okay, well, on to the main event. May, December.
Absolutely, yeah. We rarely do a pre-chat, Lily.
I know, it was nice warming up. Yeah, I guess to wrap up, I would say Aesthetica, strongly recommend. It's actually an absolute bargain for the amount of films you see. And the great thing about it is because you see that, so they do these slots of like 1 hour, 1 hour and a half of different genres. You can just go for an hour, see 6 films, and you feel like you've put the time in, and you've got this amazing like smorgasbord. What did you say? It was like tapas.
You get a bunch of different types. You see different directors, different cinematographers, different styles of film, different styles of filmmaking. And even if you don't particularly engage with one film, it's not quite working for you, then within 5 to 10 minutes, you'll have a different film coming along. So you've not locked into a film where you're just like, oh God, I'm not sure about this film. And the other thing that's exciting is these are the up and coming filmmakers. Short films are usually a springboard for people. So you may see some work that a few years later is now a major television or film director. So it's quite exciting to be there at the kind of ground level to see people's early talent, and you can almost get a sense of, oh yeah, that person seems to have something that they're interesting to say, so they'll be on to something.
Yes, and exciting to know that they are probably in the audience. Like, we heard a few directors at certain points commenting on their films. So of course you have to keep that in mind and be careful not to say anything until you're well out of earshot.
Rule number 1 of Film Festival Club is you do not bitch about the films until you are well away from the screening area and you're in your own little nook in a pub. And even then,
don't
careful.
Name it. Keep things vague so they don't, keep speaking hush tones.
They're everywhere. Those directors. Like the thing is, Lily, I've been that person, the director at a film fest, many short film festivals, and it's agony. Like, I keep completely quiet because I don't even want anyone to overhear me talking about being a director. So it's like the maximum chance of them getting a real response from them, that they don't have to mask it. So it's terrifying. You think, oh my God, what happened if they slate it?
Yeah.
And then I've also, I think I told you this at the time, that I was at the Manchester Kino Film Festival and my film came on and it was being projected off a cassette tape. And the aspect ratio was wrong. It was all squashed looking. And I was fuming because this is my film being projected on the big screen. So I legged it up to the projection booth, pushed the door open. I was like, you're screening it at the wrong aspect ratio. And he says, you've got 2 options. We can either carry on like this or I can stop the film, restart it, change aspect ratio. I was like, oh, fucking hell. Carry the film on.
I think you should have stopped it, honestly. Honestly. It's like a fucking joke. What a joke. It's an outrage.
Yeah, he said I put the wrong thing on the box. I didn't. And he took the point, actually. He took the point.
What?
So there's lots of grumbling. It still happens about projection because
we heard a bit of that. Of like, God,
and I've been there as well. Because as a short filmmaker, you are super keen to be a director, so you obsess over everything. And it's been a big challenge to get the finished film done. So you've probably seen each image load and you know exactly in your head how you want it to look. And then you go to a projection and it's like the blacks aren't very black or the contrast's a bit crunch. And lots of grumbling about the projection.
Yeah. Yes. Speaking of projection, let's talk about May, December.
Ooh, a segue that I'm curious about, Lily.
Let's start with the headlines, the top line, the plot, before we get into our experience of seeing the film. As I said before, May, December is Todd Haynes' new film, and it is loosely based on the case of Mary Letourneau, who was an American teacher who had a sexual relationship with one of her students. So this is actually the rare case of a film where the reality is actually slightly worse than the fiction, because in the actual case, the student in question was only 12. I actually knew about this case. Probably most people, I guess, in America know about it because it was a huge kind of tabloid story at the time when the case came to light. But I actually read about it. It was mentioned in passing in a journal article when I was doing my master's. And I was like, what on earth? What is this? So I looked into it and found this interview on YouTube. I think it was was it Diane Sawyer or Barbara Walters interviewed
classic Barbara Walters.
Yeah, very classic. And this was similarly to the film. This was interviewing the couple later down the line when they were together and had children, talking about this relationship. And so I was like fascinated by this, not the crime in it of itself, the affair or whatever you want to call it, is kind of one thing. But the fact that because what actually happened with Mary Letourneau is that she was sent to prison for having this relationship. And then her and the boy subsequently got together when he was 18. They got together, got married, had children. She actually gave birth in prison. And so for me, that was like completely wild and stayed with me. So when I heard that Todd Haynes, one of my favorite directors, was making a film based on this story, I was like, oh my God, this is just, it sounds grim, but it's the perfect story for him because his interest is so in the kind of ambiguities of things.
See, I didn't know what the story was going in, so because I didn't know that in advance, I do like these. If I haven't already spoiled the film by knowing a bit too much about the plot, then I'll try not to. So May December was a classic case in point here. I didn't read anything about it apart from when he was his new Todd Haynes film. But because it was called May December, my brain did a whole bunch of, this is what the film's going to be about. So Todd Haynes often deals with the outsider. And often it's the queer outsider or the gay outsider in society. So I was like, okay, it's called May December, which is obviously like a reference to an age gap relationship, May December
Right, that's like a
relationships.
French phrase.
Yeah. So I thought, Todd Haynes, the title's May December. It's got Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman in. It's clearly they're going to fall in love. So I was like, I was watching this film thinking, wow, I mean, it's going to be very unlikely that Natalie Portman's going to, is it the bit with the makeup where they did, I was like, finally, are we going to, and then after some point, I did have to admit defeat that I'd just made that up or got it completely wrong. And the film wasn't at all about that.
Wait, but did the penny not drop when it is revealed the nature of Julianne Moore's relationship with her husband?
Absolutely not, no, because I was like, oh no, she's at it again.
What? That's hilarious. I love that.
The penny was dangling, and then maybe my fingers very slowly opened on the penny, but the penny was a thick penny, so my finger had to get really open before the penny. And then I was in like very low gravity, so the penny was like in slow motion.
You're like, when are they going to snog? When are they going to snog? May, December, when are they going to snog? Well, okay, spoiler.
Date night was ruined, let's say that.
Well, yeah, spoiler alert, though I don't think we need to spoil too much in this film, so we're not going to do that. It's I think, but that's the one thing we will spoil is like, don't expect Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman to get together. It's not going to happen. Yeah, don't make
the assumptions I did there, you see.
I love that. But
I blame Todd Haynes' body of work for misleading me.
Fair enough.
I'm joking here, obviously.
but it's true. I heard about this film a year ago, and I've been anticipating, like anxiously waiting for this film to come out.
Right.
And so I did think kind of early on in the film, because there is this sort of slow reveal, which, okay, we have spoiled that slightly. Sorry, guys. The slow reveal of the nature of the relationship at hand. I did think I would have probably got something from not knowing anything going into it. But other than that, it was fine. I wasn't disappointed because the interesting thing, kind of like linking it back to what I said about that interview I saw with Barbara Walters, was that just as with that in this film, the story isn't about the crime itself. It's about that Julianne Moore and Charles Melton, who plays Joe, her husband, their relationship 23 years on from that time. We meet them in a week where their children are graduating from university. So their kids are 18. And Charles Melton's character, Joe, he is the age that Gracie was when she had the affair with him. He's 36. And we follow as Elizabeth, Natalie Portman's character, an actress, comes and spends a week with them to basically do character research, because she's going to play Gracie in what she calls an independent film. Though it becomes quite clear that it's a TV movie rather than the something more classier, I guess. She has this higher opinion of it, and she's obviously takes her work very seriously. But obviously, as the film goes on, it becomes quite clear that she herself it's amazing, because when we first meet Natalie Portman's character, I think we're predisposed to like her because we're following her as she enters into this weird dynamic. And she seems, if a little bit phony, kind of fine. And then stuff starts to happen as the film progresses, which makes you think, oh, actually, no, she is not okay either. And it starts to twist. So that final, I won't spoil
Nobody's
it, but
okay.
Yeah, nobody is okay.
Okay.
So tell me what you thought of the film.
Well, true confession time here, Lily. It's like I feel like I've got to confess my cinema sins here. This is the first Todd Haynes film I've ever watched from beginning to end. Yeah,
but that's okay.
Yeah, I know. It just that he's definitely somebody who I should have seen more of. But and weirdly, he's probably out of, if there's like a Venn diagram of directors who I know a lot about, but films I've never seen. It's him and Pedro Almodovar, probably the two number ones.
Right.
In fact, I know more about Todd Haynes' filmography probably than Pedro Almodovar's. But I've read a really good book on film production by Christine Vachon, who's produced most of his movies, and she was the producer or the exec producer on this one as well, on May December. So they've
Ah.
worked together since the 90s. So I know a lot about that, but it's almost like I'm more interested in reading about his films than but for some reason I don't want to go sit down and watch them. So, I've finally popped my Todd Haynes cherry. And yeah,
that is actually not an ideal thing to say given the subject matter at hand, but
oops.
I love it.
Oops, yes, sorry, that is incredibly insensitive, and I would like to apologize. Yeah,
I think it's okay. I think given the tone of this film, I think it's fine.
yeah, because because I looked on IMDb because I was like the tone, right, and it's listed on IMDb as comedy drama, so it's a comedy in places, right? Because it can.
I was laughing
this is the
out
thing.
loud quite a lot.
This is the thing where, like, I feel like if I'd watch more Todd Haynes, I'd get it. But I do know that Todd Haynes has a flair for the melodramatic. I know he pulls on the work of Douglas Sirk quite a lot. I know that Far From Heaven was like a riff on Sirk movies. Immediately with the music, it's like melodramatic music in May, December. I couldn't gauge when I was watching it quite how it's deliberately ridiculous and part how it's unintentionally, but I think it's mostly deliberate. But I've never quite seen a film that's
deliberate.
Yeah, I've never seen a film that plays up the melodrama quite as pronounced as that.
Yeah, and it can be a bit jarring. For me, I thought the main thing was the music, right? There are these very jarring, dramatic notes,
piano,
like, dun, dun, at certain moments, which aren't really in keeping with what's happening in the scene necessarily, and it pulls you out of it a bit. But I think that's quite deliberate.
That's the point. Yeah, I got the impression it was just I'd never seen a film that really does that before, and I imagined if I'd seen more of Todd Haynes' films, I suspect it's in keeping with his kind of style. I don't know.
I haven't seen every single one of his films, so I'll also confess that. But the films I've seen of his, there isn't that exact form of melodrama, I would say. I mean, it's interesting. So apparently, the score, those notes, those melodramatic notes, they're from an adaptation of the score from that film, The Go-Between, that 1971 film with Julie Christie in it. Have you seen that?
No.
It's a good movie, but it's a film about a woman who befriends a schoolboy and uses him to as the go-between between her and her lover, and what happens to this boy. So there's an interesting kind of echo of vulnerable boy, older woman falling in love with her.
So it's riffing on that as well.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice.
I guess there was a very clear this is comedy moment at the top, but which I read completely as comedy, and I thought it was funny where Julianne Moore opens the fridge and there's a look of shock on her face, and the camera zooms into her and she goes, "We've run out of burgers or sausages." Or she says something mundane, and the music's like dang, dang, dang. I was like, okay, so we're going for comedy here, but then the subject matter obviously it's not what you would imagine would be the subject matter of a comedy, and it's certainly not played broadly.
But I think you've just hit the nail on the head there with, I think that this is what Todd Haynes is interested in, is the mundane and how that can be both horrifying and also comedic.
Yeah.
Like two sides of that same coin. And it's an odd, that kind of flip between the melodramatic and also the very voyeuristic, right? We're watching, it feels uncomfortable a lot of the time because we're watching as these uncomfortable encounters are happening and this horrible history is being invoked. And then at the same time, that's coming up against some real naturalism and realism. This is ultimately a character study with characters that feel very, very real and are very well drawn. So that kind of contradiction.
It's a bit of a melding of heightened reality, but also very grounded. So it's an interesting blend that you don't see that often in many films, really. And it did feel like I'm watching a director's kind of signature style or signature preoccupations, but without having seen his other films. It's hard to say for sure. But I would say as well, discussing this, I think we both saw it last night because it's only just come out, so it's kind of still hot off the press. I'm not that used to watching a film this quickly and then recording the episode, so my brain hasn't percolated away as much as it might usually do. So this is me still figuring the film out a bit more than usual, I think.
I feel like it's still with me. I feel disconcerted from having watched it, and I think that's classic Todd Haynes.
Oh yeah, it's an outsider story, isn't it? It might not be the outsider story I imagined when going in, but it's a group of people living an outsider life, but trying to make it work in society.
As in the couple.
Yeah, and the couple, the family dynamic, they are essentially outsiders, but they're trying to, their story, their entire relationship is of outsiders.
So with Todd Haynes, I feel like there are two main themes like that he likes to pursue. On the one hand, it's like music. He's done a film that was almost a biopic of Bowie's life, but he didn't get permission to do it, to use his music and stuff. So he made it a broader 70s film. That was Velvet Goldmine. And then there's I'm Not There, the Bob Dylan biopic. And he also did a documentary on Velvet Underground. And then on the other side, and I have to admit, I didn't love Velvet Goldmine, which slightly put me off watching those other ones, even though I love Bob Dylan. The premise of it being 7 different actors playing him was like a little bit mad to me. But now I think I need to go back and watch all of them to get a full overview of his work. But then on the other side, the side that I'm really into and that I love is the kind of women controlled by, closeted in a society that has a lot of that's wrong with it, societal sickness, and how that manifests, the cost of that to the women who are oppressed by it, and also kind of sexual dissatisfaction with like various areas of their lives. So say Far From Heaven, Carol, and I feel like May December fits into that to an extent, but it's an interesting one because this is it. The difference is that in those other films, so say for example, that is a woman who's being oppressed by suburbia, and we see the manifestation of that in like an illness that we don't know if it's real or not, but there are these clear things oppressing her about society's
and that's
control.
Julianne Moore, isn't it? It was Julianne Moore as well.
Yes.
So they worked together from the start of his career. Right?
Yeah, they've done 4 films together, which is another reason why I love him, because I love Julianne Moore, and he really, I feel like, has brought out her best performances. That in this is an interesting one, right? Because the ways in which this particularly Julianne Moore's character is being harmed by society, I think we all would feel that she did wrong, and it's correct that we have this morality that stops this kind of thing happening. It is, I think we all agree that it is wrong for a grown woman to have a relationship with a 13-year-old. And so it has a different level of uncomfortableness because the film doesn't like out and out pass moral judgment. I don't think we really ever get to know her, but we see that there's nothing more there to her. We don't see that there is this like evilness underneath. She just thinks she didn't do anything wrong, and that's it. And you see her be upset by the difficulty of her life and what's come of it, which is kind of sad, right? And it's like, so it's kind of complicated. And so I love that he was kind of taking this theme that he's interested in, but pushing it in a new direction that's like more uncomfortable for the viewer to have to engage with.
Yeah, which is what a good director should do, really keep kind of exploring their themes. But I thought Julianne Moore's performance was fantastic in this film. I just thought, for me, that's a perfect, definitive reading of a narcissistic mother, of somebody who lives in their own world and doesn't believe they've done wrong. Like one of the characters says, every day she wakes up, believe it, like when she doesn't, she seems to have no concern. And it's like, then all the way her family react to her, the daughter who's left, the comment she makes to the daughter when she's trying on the dress about, it shows off your arms, you're much braver than I am, the kind of negging, everything she does, it's self-centered around her. And I've never seen it portrayed that kind of clearly on screen before.
Yeah, it's true. And I think the fact that we don't get anything under it, right? There's no deeper complexity.
No, there's no depth.
She is very much, which is like in a way the most complex thing you can show, right? When everyone else around you does have a lot more than that. We see, in contrast to that, we see Joe, her husband. It's an amazing performance, I think, as well, from Charles Melton, because you see how he is a stunted adolescent, right? He's gone straight from adolescence to middle age with nothing in between, and he isn't able to, he's clearly unhappy in certain ways, but not able to articulate himself at all. And that scene with him and his son is just like heartbreaking. It's so moving. So you see all of that going on at work underneath him, and that contrast to Gracie. They are such different characters. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because he is an emotionally immature adult because he's essentially skipped growing up. The more you get to know him and see what he's like, you just think, God, what is their relationship based on back when they had their initial affair? I think there's an expectation almost, you're watching the film, but you'll understand the depth and the richness of their relationship, but actually it's not there.
yeah.
It's two empty people who somehow have got this connection and it's just been falling apart for them.
But I feel like you hit upon it, because they're both isolated because of what they did, or Gracie did to Joe, and so all they have is each other, really. But it's amazing, like seeing what happens when you double down on something you do wrong, right? Like if she had, because it's actually horribly, it's not uncommon. Perhaps with someone that young is uncommon, but women teachers do have relationships with their students, unfortunately. And I think the normal thing is that there may be a child, there may be not, but then that's the end of it. The idea that you would then
lessons learned.
Yeah, you move on with your life.
Don't seduce students.
Yeah, there is harm, and then people move on. But the fact that they, and this is what happened in reality, is actually doubled down on that, got married, had children, stayed in the same,
prove them all wrong.
Stayed in the same town where because Gracie was, again, as in real life, was married and had a family when she had this relationship. And there is this incredible scene where they encounter the family, and both Gracie and Joe's children are the same age as her daughter, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh God, I can't even believe it. Her daughter with her ex-husband. So they're all graduating, they're all in the same year. And just seeing seeing how the harm that can be caused and then continues to be caused because out of this will to like make it all worth it, actually just like causes more and more damage. And that history kind of fracturing through to the present day is amazing to see on the screen.
And there's the sequence towards the end of the film between Gracie and Joe when Joe tries to have a discussion with Gracie about perhaps I was too young. And she does the classic thing of narcissism, which is not to discuss the question at hand, but to turn it round. And suddenly it's Joe who seduced her and who was the boss and all that kind of stuff. It's like,
and that language was lifted
it's
from that Barbara Walters interview, I believe. That is actually what the real
woman
said on camera, saying, but who was the boss? Who was the boss? And he literally actually says, this is a weird, he was like, well, yes, I pursued you. This is a weird conversation because obviously it's amazing watching that because we're all thinking, yes, but you don't see how this sounds. This is
it doesn't sound
insane.
Good. The 13-year-old boss of the relationship.
Yes. And when even in their dynamic now that you see, she treats him like a child. She gives him chores to do. He doesn't embody adulthood at all. He's barely even kind of there, It's incredible performance.
I really liked Charles Melton's performance. I thought that was a gem in the film for sure.
But I think the actual, what makes it so, what takes it to another interesting place is the fact that we've got Natalie Portman's character as well alongside it, who herself, as the film progresses and how she engages with everyone, you see more and more that she herself is incredibly exploitative. She's doing a Gracie herself, right? She's taking what she can from all of them, and with this very phony fake, I want to tell your truth, thank you so much. And then we see how, even as Gracie herself says to her at the end, how there's this insecurity underneath everything because she is desperate for people to be attracted to her.
Yeah.
It's very well done, I think, to have that element involved because I think it's unexpected. You expect her to be perhaps slightly more neutral, likable character that we're following into it, and actually not at all by the end. Yeah,
absolutely. So where did you go catch the film then? You said you want to talk about it here. Have you got something to confess?
No, nothing to confess. Nothing to confess. But I won't name the cinema because I don't want to be rude. But the opposite of confession. I wanted to say I feel like actually finally us having, after many years of you saying to me, it's all about quality, you got to see the best screening you can see. I think our episode on cinematic experience has actually made a mark because where I saw it was a very nice cinema, one of the nicest I've been to, old school, very cool looking, but the projection itself was terrible. Like, definitely worse quality than if I'd seen it on my screen on my TV at home.
I do want to just dig down in this a bit, because I watched it in like one of the smaller screens. We tried to find the best screen we could see it on, because obviously that's my just default of how I go to the cinema. But my options were very, very limited, so we went to screen 4 in
That's
a
why I
particular
went
cinema.
to this place. It was quite a random choice.
So yeah, it definitely was not a great projection. However, the film's aesthetic was it was shot digitally, but they put grain on it to try and make it look like 60mm film grain. So the quality of the original image. Yes, if you were thinking it didn't look great because it had a grainness to it, that was
very
applied
grainy.
to that's a deliberate aesthetic, I would say. That was a choice that they made, because that was shot on one of the latest, greatest digital cameras. So the actual image from that camera is pristine. It's digital, which is obviously, I hate digital, but it was a very pristine image. So that would have been added on to give it this 60mm low budget film shoot.
Okay, fine. Okay,
that
makes a lot more sense. Especially with other Todd Haynes films. I should have known, really.
I think even on the best screen we could have seen it on, I think it would have still had a slightly lo-fi look to it, which was by design.
Okay,
but yeah,
fine.
But also, you're starting to discern differences. But on this particular occasion, I think it was essentially intentional, not the projection's fault.
Okay, fine. Well, I saw Saltburn just before it, which we're going to discuss next week, and that was all a different screening, but also not amazing projection. So I think I am definitely like tuned into it now.
You're starting to learn it, yeah, which is great. That's all I want to do, is just open people, yourself and anyone who listens, just try and appreciate better quality and look for better quality possible, because you pay the same price for your ticket, you may as well get the best picture.
Yeah,
I'm jealous that you've seen Saltburn already, because A, I haven't seen it yet, and B, I saw a film yesterday before I saw May December, and it wasn't Saltburn, and I wish it had been. It was.
What did you see?
Well, I just had to preface this by, I was going to see it with a film school friend, Susan, who was my sound designer on my short films. She now works as a sound designer for feature films and TV. So we were going for a research trip to listen to the Dolby Atmos Theatre at the Odeon Trafford Centre in Manchester, right? So it was a research trip, but the only film that was on at the Dolby Theatre was Hunger Games, the new Hunger Games.
That
was brutal, shockingly awful. Like, it was. Susan summed it up. She said, "I went to see Killers of the Flower Moon last week, and that felt shorter. This felt twice as long as Killers of the Flower Moon, and it's an hour shorter. It's 2.5 hours.
No way. Oh,
good
gosh.
God, Lily. If you want to see how not to make a film, go see Hunger Games. It's just unbelievable." And I couldn't believe how many the film just stops for Rachel Ziegler to sing songs. Like, she has a guitar, gets a microphone and strums, and she has these big song sections. Like, what am I watching?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that you had to experience that.
But I knew that the thing is, I did know it was going to be shit. It's the first time in a long time where I've gone to see a film that I know is going to be terrible. But we listened and there were some good bits there were good moments in the Dolby Atmos mix. But did it counteract the bad film? Absolutely not.
But bringing it back to May December, because I just wanted to talk about the script.
Just went off grid there.
No, I love that. For just an off-piste negative review, we should throw them into every episode to keep people listening.
Spice things up.
But yeah, so May December, the screenplay was written by Sammy Birch, her first feature-length screenplay, in fact, and it was on the blacklist from 2020, which, James, what is the blacklist?
I'll give you a potted mini history. So there's the name blacklist, I think, is a reference to the blacklist that existed in the 1950s in America, which was the McCarthy-era communist witch hunts, where communism was seen as the worst thing ever and it needed to be stamped out in America. So they went on the hunt for communists, especially like people in the creative communities, because all those crazy creatives are all left-wing, super liberal commies. So the blacklist got drawn up. So people who were outed as being communist or having communist affiliations, people who've seen Oppenheimer, that kind of thing was going on there with Oppenheimer, that they wanted to discredit him as being out him as a communist. So that was happening all around America in lots of different industries, especially Hollywood. So people got blacklisted as communists. So it affected their careers as directors and writers. Lots of people didn't work for quite a while. It kind of went away in the 60s when McCarthyism suddenly wasn't as popular and that whole thing died down. A lot of people got their careers rehabilitated. There's now a modern blacklist, which is the opposite of that. And I think it's trying to reclaim that term, reclaim the history of the blacklist to be something much more positive, basically, which is the opposite. So every year since 2005, a list is drawn up of the best unproduced screenplays that executive producers at film studios have seen that year. They will submit what they think the best unproduced screenplays are, and there's a list drawn up. So every year you can go and look at the blacklist and see, is there a film that interests you? Maybe you want to make it. So that's how it's a way of getting films made.
Yeah. So Franklin Leonard started it, and it's kind of a survey of most liked screenplays. So hundreds of development executives are sent this list of named screenplays, and then the ones with the most likes make it to the list, which I quite like as a very simple, straightforward, just, we like it. I think it was a way of just spotlighting great scripts that have been overlooked. But actually, I think it's like over 1,000 screenplays have been on this list, and out of them 440 have been produced for theatrical release.
Wow, that's pretty good odds.
And according to a Harvard School business study, blacklisted scripts are twice as likely to be made into films, and
they make 90% more money than the films that weren't off the blacklist. It's like, I don't know what the parameters are there. I imagine there's a lot of wiggle, but it seems to be that if you produce a blacklist film, the odds of making your money back are increased. It seems to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm less interested in the revenue element of it, but obviously that for the wider films get made because people think they can make money out of them, so it is important.
Yeah.
But I like that it definitely does help, because I was wondering how does it actually help? Because the interesting thing with some of these films on the blacklist that have been made is that it's not all like indie films. Like May December, you can see that as being a film that would have done the rounds. It's interesting, but perhaps it's quite a provocative subject matter. So you can see why it maybe wouldn't get made. But there are also films like Bohemian Rhapsody and The King's Speech and, as you mentioned, babe, The Hunger Games. Like these were all on the blacklist at certain points.
Was the Hunger Games on the blacklist?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because it just shows that actually, even with the kind of franchise type known product like The Hunger Games, there are often things stopping these films getting made. So it's difficult to get films made, basically. So it's great that that this is there to kind of give certain films a push.
There's one film I remember going to see, and I went to see it purely because it was a blacklist film, and I was just curious to see what a blacklist film was like. But when you look at the list of blacklist films that have been produced, you've seen loads of them. There's a lot of films on the blacklist that we've probably seen, like Slumdog Millionaire. The King's Speech is one that is a notable one I've seen. Spotlight was a great film. I haven't seen Argo, but a lot of films that a lot of people might have seen.
Yeah. Notes on a Scandal, another film that was based on this story that we talked about of another film based on the affair between a teacher and a student.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Popular topic for the blacklist.
Yeah. And Promising Young Woman, actually. I mentioned how we're talking about Saltburn next week, and we've talked about
Promising Young Woman on there. But hang on. But it doesn't make no sense, Lily. It was written by the director. Why would you put it on the blacklist? It doesn't make sense.
Because it's not for a director, it's for a producer. She was directing, but these films are about, the films on the blacklist are about getting them produced. She didn't have a producer attached.
Right. Oh, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's not, even though it is a great spotlight, and Blacklist now, it's more of a bigger project about helping writers.
Yeah, I noticed that it's expanded out, which is good.
Yeah, it's amazing. But actually, there are lots of directors on this list too, because you need to find a producer to have those films produced.
Yeah, I hadn't realised that about Promising Young Woman. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that being on the blacklist is a certain type of film, because there's some that have been a huge success.
No, I don't think so.
When I went to see Source Code, for example, I did think I can see why that probably didn't get picked up immediately, because it didn't quite work. I thought the premise was okay, but it felt like not amazing. But that's not the case with all the films on the blacklist, because The King's Speech and Spotlight are absolutely cracking films. But part of me wondered, is the blacklist not particularly a guarantee of quality? But I don't think that's the case.
Oh, God, no. I mean, I made a list of the best films to my mind on there. And Spotlight, The Revenant, Juno, Notes on a Scandal.
Oh, yeah, Juno, yeah.
In Bruges, Superbad,
fucking
The
Bruges.
Hangover, and then also The King's Speech and The Menu from last year. It's like a huge array of
Oh, wow, The
films.
Menu is blacklist.
The
I
Menu is
enjoyed The Menu a lot.
Don't Worry Darling was on there as well. The Arrival.
See, Don't Worry Darling, I would put there with Source Code. Maybe the blacklist isn't good for science fiction, because Source
No, but
Code
Arrival's on there.
Right, fine.
I don't
Okay,
think
fine.
there's any. I think you're right. There probably are. Of course, there will be films on there, which is it's the reason it didn't get a first pass is because something wasn't quite right. But I actually think that is probably just one element, because obviously loads on this list, the script is perfect, so there's something else going on there. There are loads of reasons why films don't get made, and I think it's just about putting a spotlight on those on scripts that I think because the fact that it's just about them being liked, I think that's great, because it's just giving a boost to something that like probably was like is almost there, but just hasn't found its producers just yet, you know?
Yeah,
But that
and
could be for many different reasons.
But possibly because things have changed so dramatically the past even just 5 years with the move to streamers, that maybe a lot of these films aren't really quite. Maybe the reason they're now liked is that they are good films, and maybe 10 years ago they would have been made no problem. Whereas now perhaps the people, the execs who are liking these scripts are liking them, but they think we can't make that right now. I mean,
Maybe.
we've gone through the superhero film era, which is now crashing and burning spectacularly. So I wonder, out of the ashes of that, will we get more smaller budget? Because it's interesting to read that they're not all small, low-budget little contained dramas like May, December, that some of them are bigger set pieces. But I wonder if studio execs are just thinking, well, there's just not as big an audience for these kind of films anymore, but it's really good, so on the blacklist it goes.
Yeah, I also think it's just a testament to the fact that a script is really important, but it is not the only thing that makes a hit movie. Because of the films that have topped the list, so The Imitation Game has topped the list overall. It's got 133 likes, and okay, I must I fell asleep during it. It wasn't for me, but however we feel about it, right? I don't know if it was a hit or not financially speaking, but obviously it won.
It was a hit on the blacklist, right?
It got an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. It did well that year, and we remember it, right?
Wow.
But everything else that topped the list, none of them are films that I've seen or for the most part heard of, like Things We Lost in the Fire, The Brigades of Rattlebourg, Recount, Move On, Headhunter, Cauliflower. Like, I don't know any of these movies.
I've not heard any of those.
Yeah, so I think just because a script is really good and well written, obviously doesn't necessarily mean it's going to become a big hit. But it's cool to have this boost to all those films, and then out of them, some amazing things are being made, like I would argue May, December. Okay, shall we take a trip to the film pharmacy?
Yes, please.
Hi, Lily and James. As a creative person, musician specifically, I find getting off the sofa and finding motivation to write or create sometimes hard. Do you have a film to inspire me to be creative and get the juices flowing?
So a musician seeking inspiration. So I was pondering this. There's many films I would reach for inspiration, but I think it's a musical based one. I was trying to think what we could have that's inspiring. And one of the first ones that came to mind was Inside Llewellyn Davis, which is a Coen brothers film. It's set in the 1960s. It follows a week in the life of like a struggling folk singer in Greenwich Village in New York, played by
Oscar Isaac.
Oscar Isaac, thank you. Sorry, I had a little blank there.
I haven't seen it, but I fancy him very much, so it's on my list. I want to watch it at some point.
There you go. It's a lovely little film, and it'll remind you of why I think musicians are musicians. There's that indefinable thing that makes the struggle of maybe not earning a lot of money and things being a bit tight. You've got to remember there's a reason why they are musicians, why they do it, and it nails that perfectly, I think. And then I'm not sure if this would inspire you, but Whiplash, it's almost the opposite of Inside Llewellyn Davis. This is like the intensity and the madness that drives creative people.
Do you not think that might just be like, oh no, I don't have that kind of intensity?
Well,
it might be demotivating.
That's why I'm with the proviso that I'm not sure it's quite what you're after. But Inside Llewellyn Davis, if that doesn't quite do it for you, maybe Whiplash will. But I would go with Inside Llewellyn Davis, because I agree with you. Whiplash might put you off.
When I was thinking about it, I thought also like, oh, musician, what specifically would work for a musician? But actually, as someone who's not a musician, it's hard for me to say. But also, I find personally that the films that inspire me creatively or just give me some kind of feeling of inspiration often aren't, it's not the artist isn't doing something that I do, right? So I don't think it needs to be necessarily the same kind of work for you to still feel inspired. So I was thinking more about like the different things that can demotivate you or make you feel less driven and what you can do to boost those. It's hard not to think about ones we'd already discussed, because what came to mind was Jodorowsky's Dune. In terms of like creative ambition, just to like go for it and
go for it,
go for your dreams and let you be as ambitious with what you want to achieve as possible. I feel like it's
a great recommendation, actually.
Yeah, it's a good motivator for that, right? Even though it doesn't end up with the product. Something in just seeing him talk about it, I found his passion is like super inspiring. And then I also thought of Moon Age Daydream, which I feel like we've mentioned many times, but in terms of seeing David Bowie's sense of imagination, just pure creativity, really. I found it very inspiring and kind of awe-inspiring to watch. And then my third recommendation, got a few. This might be just personal to me, I don't know. But recently I watched Lady Boss, the Jackie Collins story. And
right, where's that? Where can I find Lady Boss, the Jackie Collins story?
That is on Curzon Home. You can probably find other places. That's where I was lucky enough to see it. And quite a rogue choice. I've never read any Jackie Collins novels. I do have one on my bookshelf, but I haven't quite found I've got it from one of those little libraries on the street. I like got it out of there thinking maybe at some point I'll be in the mood, but I haven't yet found the moment. But watching this documentary, I was just so struck by her work ethic. She was just always writing. And considering that it's generally taken that she's not like the best writer in the world, right? I was just so impressed by her never being really an issue. She always loved writing. She always did it. And that I found very kind of inspiring and motivating, even though I myself am not a writer, right? So I think those three would be my recommendation.
I think they sound great. I'm actually quite interested in this Jackie Collins documentary. I didn't even know existed.
She's a really inspirational woman. She's an incredible woman, like forefront of feminism without even really taking up that mantle, and despite feminists always telling her that she was doing harm rather than good, I actually think she's an incredible person, very flawed and complex.
Like all the best characters are.
Absolutely, yeah. I strongly recommend that, actually. It's very watchable, definitely a laptop film to hark back to.
It's not a cinematic experience, you would say. It doesn't.
No.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, got you. No, I'm super interested in that one. Well, thank you for those recommendations, Ali.
And to you, James. Hopefully they'll be useful to our listener. All right, so thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Groovy Movies.
And if you could leave us a like or a review on any of the platforms that you listen to us on, we would really appreciate that. It all helps grow our audience and get us out there to more people.
Yeah. All right, guys. So we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Follow us on Instagram at Groovy Movies Pod or email us groovymoviespod@gmail.com.
Groovy Movies was produced and edited by Lily Austin.
Music and sound by James Brailsford.
Our logo was designed by Abby Jo Sheldon.
For references and more information about the films discussed, check out the show notes.